MLS Decision Day is Saturday. What's at stake, Jason?
What's at stake on MLS Decision Day? Well, why don't we look at the standings and try to get a little sense of this as we go into the matches tomorrow. So this is the Eastern Conference. Inter Miami top the table. Supporter Shield winners already locked and loaded on that front. Number 1 seed overall in the MLS Cup playoffs. But what are they playing for on the final day, Robert? They are playing to try to break the MLS points record held by the New England Revolution, who they face off against on Decision Day. Now, obviously, that was when the Revs were good under Bruce Arena, and now they're not good. So it's a different era. I'm sure they would love to keep Miami from taking the record off of them. However, you look down the table. After that, there's not much. There's a little bit of seeding possibilities. Orlando and NYCFC could swap places depending on results. Charlotte could jump NYCFC possibly depending on things. They have DC United. DC United has something to play for. Red Bull's right there as well in terms of seeding. But DC United, Montreal, Philadelphia, and Atlanta are all still alive for the 8 and 9 spots in the Eastern Conference. If Philly beats Cincinnati, then they have to, right? In order to get into the playoffs, they have to beat Cincinnati. They'll get in, I think, because they'll have a goal difference tiebreaker if neither DC nor Montreal win, pick up a single point, win or draw on the day. It's you talk it out, it sounds complicated, but pretty much it means Philadelphia has to win. There's no guarantee they get in, but they have to win. DC United, Montreal with a draw would be in for sure. DC with Charlotte there, and Montreal with NYCFC. So, not easy challenges for them. But that's the Eastern Conference look right now, Robert. Actually, do we have the Eastern Conference schedule? I think we have that one as well. We can probably pull that up. I know that's skipping a bit. There it is. Montreal hosting NYCFC. Fire hosting Nashville. Neither one of those teams have anything to play for. DC and Charlotte. We already talked about that. DC with a draw or a win is in. Charlotte's already in. It's a matter of seeding for them. Miami for the points record. Red Bulls at home against Columbus. Columbus can't improve their play, so it's just a matter of, do you want to go into the playoffs with some momentum? I think the Red Bulls can improve their place depending on things elsewhere. Orlando City, Atlanta United playing for their lives if they want to make the playoffs, and as I mentioned, Philly and Cincinnati. So any thoughts on the Eastern Conference for you, Robert, as we look at this?
I think that I got to tip my hat. Something I rarely do, tip my hat to MLS scheduling.
By the way,
the Inter Miami versus the Revs.
I hate to interrupt you, and I keep doing this, and I know this is because I have European brain so much these days. Joseph is correct. It's wins, not goal difference that matters. But I think if we can go back, I know I'm putting a lot here. Can we go back to the Eastern Conference standings after what Joseph just corrected me on? Because what I want to see is, again, Philadelphia down there in 11th place. Now, we don't have their wins here. We just have points. So we would have to have the full list of wins and everything else in order to know exactly whether or not, so Philadelphia is a team that is much better than anybody else in the conference on goal difference. But in terms of their wins, that's what, again, ultimately matters for making the playoffs. They are on 9 wins right now. DC United is on 10. Montreal's on 10. So this is what I'm saying. So even though tiebreaker is wins, if Philly wins and DC and Montreal, one or both, loses, Philly will have the tiebreaker because they'll have the same number of wins and they'll be better in goal difference, which is the second tiebreaker, right? So make sure Joseph is on board with that too. Joseph confirmed with me. Thank you very much. I had it correct. I just didn't explain it correctly. Thank you to Joseph for that.
I was just about to give kudos to the MLS schedulers. I mean, over the years, MLS has had some pretty kooky scheduling, but I think they usually get this decision day right. One thing I did see there, Toronto already played all 34 of their games.
There's an odd number of teams, and there's 29 teams in the league, Robert. Somebody's got to be cooked and done and already in the clubhouse on the final day, which, Toronto, it looks, if you go, decision day, everything's to play for. Toronto's right there. Nope, they're done. They can't make the playoffs, despite where they sit in the table right now. They're below the line, but if they had a game, they might be able to get above it. They do not, and they are done. So, yeah, there you go.
Yes, but having the top 2 teams are points record-wise, historically, having Inter Miami clash on the final day to break the record of the team that holds the record. That's just
That's
iconic.
dumb luck. That's
Yeah.
dumb luck, Robert. The schedule makers weren't like, you know what I think is going to happen? Inter Miami's going to be going for the points record, and New England's going to want to keep it from them because they hold that. That's completely luck for the MLS schedule makers.
Hey, there's the preparation and hard work leads you into getting lucky, Jason.
Okay, that's right. You're right. If you set yourself up for success, sometimes it feels like luck, but it's actually the hard work that you've done. That's such good dad things, right? That you said right there, Robert. That is good dadding right there. Good job.
Hey, you got to have these things built in at this point. I mean, I'm about 10 years deep into the dad game. You got to have a couple things in your holster. I do think that the bubble between 8 and 12 is interesting. There's 5 teams within 3 points of each other.
Yeah.
But with that tiebreaker, that maybe not as much. I mean, there's DC United, Montreal with 10 wins, but behind them, the Finnish Toronto has 11 wins. And then Philadelphia and Atlanta with the 10 wins. So that is a bit of a bottleneck there. Brooks brings up an interesting point that if the Fire win, they finish 13th for the 3rd straight year, which maybe that's the last year that they do that now that the Greg Berhalter era is incoming.
Maybe.
They can maybe hope to reach 12th, maybe.
And by the way, a note on the Fire, who are perennially disappointing. And please figure it out, Chicago. We'd like that town to matter when it comes to American soccer. I did see that Greg Berhalter had his first press conference as new head coach yesterday. Not coaching yet, but just introducing Greg Berhalter as Fire head coach. Joe Mansueto was there next to him. And apparently afterwards, Mansueto talked about the Fire searching for a location to build a soccer-specific stadium somewhere in Chicago. So
a 3rd stadium.
They're just going to go like back into the fray and like, okay, we just need to be closer than Bridgeview. We just need to be closer to the loop than Bridgeview. Like that's the only concern here at this point.
Yeah, not suburban, not downtown, not Bridgeview. Where are they going to put it? Maybe they should just have a floating, maybe put it out on Lake Michigan.
No, there were a couple of specific places mentioned, and my Chicago geography is going to fail me, but it was Lincoln Yards, which I think there was originally a plan there to build a USL stadium, and then that all fell apart, but there might be a new approach to that location. So, yeah.
So Lincoln Yards is something they were talking about like between 5 and 10 years ago, and that's an
right.
area. That's a very interesting area that's just west of like Lincoln Park and is like used to be a big like scrapping facility, like scrap metal. It's just like a mountain of scrap metal there. And I think they're trying to turn it into like this new urban development, make it like a new city within the city. So that would be a pretty interesting location if they're able to revive that. That would be quite the undertaking though. So with this whole, going for the points record thing, got to say that Arena Revs team had a very different kind of schedule. That was back in the COVID bubble days. So I think there should be a significant asterisk on that 70.
That's fair. That's interesting. An asterisk like on Liverpool's Premier League title. Robert, you agree with that, right?
No, not at all, because they still played a balanced schedule. They didn't play in a bubble.
Okay, fair enough. Jason is pointing out that while the crew,
Jason, never say that.
While the crew cannot improve their place in the standings in the Eastern Conference, they can improve their overall standing across the combined table, which obviously would improve their chances of hosting an MLS Cup final should they get there. That's a good point as well from a crew fan. Okay, so let's move on to Western. We haven't talked Western Conference at all yet. Let's do that. Let's dive into the Western Conference. Take a look at the standings out there in the West. The Galaxy atop the table on 64 points, 3 points up on LAFC, and that's really where some of this intrigue is. We'll go down in terms of seeding because the 9 teams to make the playoffs is already set in the West. Nobody below the line can get in on decision day, which is a bit of a bummer from a drama perspective for a neutral, Robert. But you have the Galaxy who have to go to Houston to play against the Dynamo. And the Dynamo are down there in 5th right now. What they want to do is maintain that 5th position because they can't catch RSL. But they don't want to go any lower than they are. That means they won't host. They won't have the home field advantage, right, in the playoffs. But they'll perhaps down the road when teams are eliminated, you want to be as high as possible. Meanwhile, LAFC has San Jose, who has absolutely nothing to play for. They will be last across all of Major League Soccer no matter what happens on the final day of the season. Can they play spoiler for Steve Cherundolo on his side as they try to jump the Galaxy in the Western Conference for that top spot? There's a little bit there. I think it's obviously, and by the way, because it has been pointed out by Joseph that wins is the tiebreaker. If you go and look at the Western Conference standings, the Galaxy are 19, LAFC is on 18. Now, obviously, for LAFC to catch the Galaxy have to lose to Houston. LAFC has to beat San Jose. They would be on the same number of wins. However, the LAFC win would have to be enough to make up a 2-goal difference in terms of that goal difference right now, which is 20-18, as you can see.
Yeah, Brooks in the comments giving a shout out to Greg Vanny getting the Galaxy back into the upper echelon of the Western Conference. LAFC with that outside shot. Do you think that LAFC could possibly pip Galaxy to that top spot?
I think the Galaxy are going to find a way to get at least a point. We will see if Vanny tries to be a little cagey with his approach against Houston, who is good at home. And, again, Houston doesn't have, again, combined standings, all of that matters. As Jason pointed out with the Crew and their challenge, if you look at the combined table, if you think about, well, Dynamo want to hold off Colorado, who could catch them, Minnesota as well. There are things there for Houston to play for. I think pride is a major part of this. It's the last game of the regular season. But I think the Galaxy are going to find a way to get at least a point, which would stave off LAFC. LAFC is probably going to beat San Jose, who is just absolutely terrible. So it could end up being 65-64 out west. And that might matter. That might matter when we get down to a Western Conference final.
On the contrary, which team, was most disappointing? Connor said which non-playoff team is most surprising. Comparing the 23 and the 2024 tables, you got to look at expansion side St. Louis City topping the tables last year.
Well, but this is a phenomenon, right? I know it was their expansion year last year, so it's a little different. But think about Austin FC, who was not a playoff team in year one, right? And tried to figure something, and then had a great year with Sebastian Giussi getting MVP love, and they were, they finished second in the Western Conference, and then the absolute drop off that they had the next year. And it was a lot of people would say, and this is that collision of like advanced analytics and some of the stats we're using and real life. And you go, well, they're outperforming all of their expected goal numbers. All of the analytics say they shouldn't be this good. They shouldn't be this high on the table. And yet there they are. And the next year, all of that catches up with them. They weren't creating good enough chances. They were lucky the year before. Things were going their way. And they finished second, and now you see where they are. And they just fired Josh Wolf, and now we'll be going looking for a new head coach. And St. Louis this year, the same thing, the massive drop-off, fire Bradley Carnell. And now they're going to try to figure out how to move into the next phase after everything looked so good for them. I think we all kind of knew it was a mirage, but this is MLS, and it does give us some of those surprises, particularly because of the format, the unbalanced schedule, which you've already mentioned, Robert. That's a thing that MLS doesn't have a balanced schedule. And, you make the playoffs, you make the playoffs. So that is a good shout. I would say that I'm not sure where St. Louis goes from here, but it's going to be fascinating to watch that. Who else is a disappointment in 2024?
I'd say Wooden Spoon winner San Jose Earthquakes sitting on just 21 points. They'll need at least a draw on decision day to equal Toronto's abysmal 2023 season.
Yeah, it's it is a pretty bad situation there in San Jose. I don't expect a lot from them. They've got an owner who has just moved his Major League Baseball team to a minor league baseball stadium in Sacramento, California. So what would you expect from his soccer team? Why would you expect better from his soccer team? I would say that
Sacramento unathletics.
Oh man, that's tough. I'm Sacramento born, Robert. I was born in Sacramento, California. I feel like I'm a pretty athletic guy, so I don't know if I like that phrasing, but I see what you're saying. I'm looking at the standings in the East. If you make the playoffs, I guess that's it's really hard to be too critical of a team that makes the playoffs. I would say that Orlando City. It's a good season. I think I was hoping for more from them this year. I think a lot of people, I might have even had them number one overall in the conference based on what they did last season under Oscar Pareja. Ooh. So that's a little bit of a disappointment to be right now in fourth, and they could potentially slip depending on results on the final day. You look down the table, obviously the season Philadelphia has had. that's not their standard. But they've aged to a point where it kind of makes sense that this is what they're in. That this is what they're facing. That they're kind of pushing against the issues of time and some of the other things that have happened for them. Nashville is a disappointment. Obviously, they made a coaching change this year as well. They had been a pretty good team and a playoff contender every year. I mean, the Revs, that I don't know. That is such a. And last year upended everything for them. But you thought maybe they'd be able to at least get competent, get at least to the mediocre level, and they're not that. They're not that. And in the Western Conference, so we can look at the Western Conference as well. Again, beside St. Louis City, I think Sporting, this the year. I think there are some fans out there in Kansas City who have finally gotten to that point where they feel like Peter Vermees has to go. It's not getting better. This has been a couple years now where they've become an also-ran in the Western Conference. FC Dallas is a disappointment. They fired their coach. I think that's fair to say. Outside of that, I mean, again, Minnesota first-year head coach makes the playoffs. Good for Eric Ramsey. Colorado, Chris Armas doing pretty good work. Been pointed out by Joseph in the chat that the Rapids sold Bombito and then haven't been great. And maybe they're not a real contender for MLS Cup, but they're there in the playoffs, and that's something to be noted.
One last note before we move on. There could be as much as a 54-point gap between first and last in Major League Soccer. Is the league becoming less balanced?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd have to think about that. I don't know what the biggest gap between first and last has ever been. That would kind of be important. Although MLS has changed so much over the years, it's kind of really hard to get a grasp. And comparing eras is definitely a thing. I don't know, if we can really do that sometimes, considering the number of teams has grown, right? It used to be, there were 8 teams, and then there were 12 teams, and then there were 16 and 18, 23, and now we're at 29. And sort of naturally, it would figure that you would have more haves and more have-nots just in a bigger soccer league. There's not enough talent and enough balance to go around. And the league has obviously been a little bit more relaxed with the rules around spending and things that have given an opportunity for clubs to be. And I think that the league finding ways, certain teams finding ways to be attractive to players who would normally command big salaries but are probably taking pay cuts or lesser salaries to play here. And I'm thinking LAFC and I'm thinking Miami, obviously. That's stretched things out a bit.